It will go live, Professor Kang. It will go live in social media
Sir.
like Facebook.
Okay,
Sir,
fine.
yes, sir. Please start.
Okay.
Okay.
So good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. I'm Dr. Asif Iqbal, Professor, School of Science and Engineering, and it is my distinct pleasure to moderate today's webinar titled The South Korean Education System, Lessons for Bangladesh. The webinar is a result of joint collaboration between Chittagong Independent University and Seoul National University Asia Center, SNUAC. We are delighted to have among us Professor Dr. M. Nurul Absar, the Vice Chancellor of CIU, Dr. Sung Yong Kang, Director, Center of South Asian Studies, SNUAC, Dr. Junhwa Cho, Research Fellow, Asia Africa Center of SNUAC, and Professor Dr. Syed Manzoor Kader, Professor and Dean, CIU Business School. On behalf of Institute of Governance, Development and International Studies, IGDIS, CIU, I extend my heartfelt appreciation to all our distinguished speakers and guests, along with our esteemed educators and students, researchers, and all engaged participants joining us live from across the country, across the campus, and perhaps even beyond. Today, we embark on a journey to explore one of the world's most remarkable education success stories, South Korea, and reflect on what Bangladesh can... It's not yet there? Should we continue, Ms. Ruma?
Sir, yes, please.
Okay. So thank you all for being with us for this important conversation. South Korea's education system is widely recognized for its academic excellence, high literacy rates, and strong focus on innovation. It's been ranked consistently among the top in global assessments such as PISA. The country has transformed itself from a nation who was worked on at one stage to a knowledge-based powerhouse within a few decades, largely fueled by its investment in education. Bangladesh, too, has made notable progress in education access and gender parity, yet we face persistent challenges such as high dropout rates, inadequate teaching training, and maybe some challenges in STEM education and the penetration at the primary and secondary and technical education level, the resource constraint in rural areas, and so on. So the goal of this webinar today is not to replicate the South Korean model wholesale, but to distill the key insights that can be contextualized on our needs, such as their strategies for the teacher development, for their vocational education. We'll talk about it in particular today, and the technological integration, the curriculum reform, and these particular areas. So what we are going to hear from our expert panels today is what worked in South Korea, what's adaptable in Bangladesh, and most importantly, what should our next steps be. With that, let us begin our today's session formally. At the beginning, I would like, for the audience, I would like to briefly structure the webinar. We are going to have an opening remarks from our Honorable Vice Chancellor for 5 minutes. Then we'll have the presentation from the experts, both the experts, that will be 15 minutes each, total 30 minutes. We won't be taking any question answer in this session. Right after their presentation, we'll have a panel discussion from Professor Kadir. And then the audience will have a 10 minutes slot for their question answer to all the presenters and the discussant. And finally, we'll have a closing remarks for a few minutes and we'll wrap it up in 1 hour. At this juncture, I would like to invite Professor Dr. M. Nurul Absar to open the session and give us a heads up on the history of the collaboration between CIU and SNU that lead up to as it stands today and where we are looking forward to in future. Sir, it's up to you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Asif Iqbal, for your opening moderation. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar organized by Institute of Governance, Development and International Studies of Chittagong Independent University in collaboration with Seoul National University Asia Center. So, good afternoon, honorable guests, respected speakers, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure once again to welcome you to this webinar titled South Korean Education System, Lessons for Bangladesh. And on behalf of IGDIS CIU, I thank each one of you for taking time to join us in this knowledge sharing session. As you all know, our partnership with Seoul National University Asia Center dates back to 2019, when we formally signed a Memorandum of Understanding, initially for 3 years, and that was extended for another 3 years. So it has already so successfully passed through our collaboration for 6 years. And today we have renewed our Memorandum of Understanding with Seoul National University Asia Center for another 5 + 5 years. And under this Memorandum of Understanding, we have carried out a number of meaningful events. We had a conference jointly organized by both the universities in 2019 in Seoul. Then a group of our faculty members led by Dr. Syed Manzoor Kadir conducted a funded research under this collaboration on our garments industry. Then our 2 faculty members published articles in SNU's journal. Then we so successfully organized a webinar marking 50 years of diplomatic relations of Bangladesh and South Korea in December 2024. And after that, today we are organizing this event. As it is all about South Korean education system, we know, if we look at the very latest World University Ranking, QS World University Ranking 2026, we have found that 3 South Korean universities have been placed in the top 100 universities of the world, where SNU has been ranked at 38th. And unfortunately, we are seeing that even though Bangladesh University has been ranked in the top 500 universities of the world. So here comes the rationale behind organizing this event. So how Bangladesh, aspiring to become a developed nation, can learn from South Korea's education system. And this is a global call. As we know, quality education is one of the major goals of Sustainable Development Goals, which every nation aims to achieve by 2030. So today we turn our attention to a country that in just a few decades has transformed itself into one of the most advanced and educated societies in the world, the Republic of Korea. From early childhood to vocational education to tertiary education, South Korea has built a system that emphasizes academic excellence, discipline, innovation, and global competitiveness. What makes South Korea's educational journey so remarkable within a couple of decades is not just its success in rankings or test scores, but the strategic vision, public-private partnership, strong national commitment, and continuous reforms that underpin it. It is a story of how education became the cornerstone of national development and global position. As Bangladesh aspires to become a developed nation, and in the year 2026, we are going for LDC graduation, our education system must play a central role in equipping our population with the knowledge, the skills, and the values needed in the 21st century. We too must ask, how can we foster a culture of meritocracy and innovation in our schools and universities? How can we ensure access, equity, and quality at all levels of education? And most importantly, how can we localize global best practices like those from Republic of Korea to meet our own unique challenges and opportunities? This webinar is not just about understanding another country's success. It is about learning, reflecting, and reimagining our own path forward. I hope today's discussion will inspire new ideas and practical strategies for policymakers, educators, and all the stakeholders committed to educational reform in Bangladesh. With that, I once again warmly welcome you all, especially our two great presenters, Professor Kang and Professor Cho, all the way from South Korea. We hope they will visit us in person in the coming days and look forward to a meaningful and engaging session. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful presentation and inspirational starting. It is now time to hear from our esteemed speakers of today. Let me introduce to the audience our first speaker, Dr. Junhua Cho, a research fellow, Asia Africa Center of SNUAC. Professor Dr. Cho is an expert of African studies. That's what he did in his bachelor's, in his master's, and in his PhD as well. So I'm eager to hear what Dr. Cho has to deliver. So Dr. Cho, it's now up to you. Please share with us your presentation.
Yeah, let me share my PPT first. Can you see the PPT?
Yes, your presentation is visible.
Thank you again for inviting me this webinar series. And then I'm so pleased to join this seminar by inviting by Professor Kang. And today's what I'm talking about the importance of human resource development and education. As I'm an Africanist, so I'm going to talk about more about how South Korea, Korean education as a donor to deliver to Africa. And in the end, I hope to get some kind of insightful comments from your sides, from my discussant regarding how there is a possibility, so-called South-South cooperation between not only Global South, but also Global North, but between those kind of countries. And your insight will be much more helpful for me to understand both different territories as well. So there are some key points. So first is external help and embedded autonomy, which means how South Korean education developed by external players and internal players from UNESCO cases and SNU cases. And another one is, the next one is 2024 Korean and Africa Summit, how South Korean government promised to help African countries in the sector, in the field of education. And the last one is the way forward for the mutual beneficial cooperation and some kind of policy suggestions. So this is me. I did PhD in politics and international studies. So I mainly focus on African studies and African politics. So before going to the Korean education success, I would like to briefly introduce one of the factors of Korea's success in the all fields. So there are, there is it's kind of conventional kind of discourse that Korea was a recipient country. It was a it was not rich, even lower than Ghana, but now it is much richer than before. But because of that, there are lots of research says that why South Korea success in a certain sectors and so on and so on. But one of the most conventional research is embedded autonomy, which is concept coined by Peter Evans. So basically, which means, as you can see on the slides, combination of coherent internal organization and close link to the society that Evan called embedded autonomy. So when you see the trajectory of Korean development in all the sectors, when they receive from the donors, mainly from US or UN, South Korean governments always firstly made the organization, internal organizations that closely working with the ministerial levels. So not only educational fields, but also economic fields, financial field, all the fields, they have internal academic or research organizations usually. So those kind of research organizations are closely working with the ministerial level in order to make certain policies for Korean society to achieve their aims or to evaluate what is the big gap between the policies and in the field. So the educational sector is the same. So they receive the fund from the outsiders, external players. They firstly made the internal organizations. So that is can be vocational center or educational center. That centers are and researchers are closely working with the Ministry of Education. So it is a kind of Peter Ivan mentioned embedded autonomy. So somehow autonomous organizations, and this is a play role to be embedded between government level and society level. So that is the kind of key factors for South Korea is able to develop their development successfully. So let me introduce some kind of UNESCO in the field of the education from the global lens. So UNESCO is the only one UN agencies with a mandate covering all levels of aspects of education. As mission statement, as you can see, specialized agency of the UN, building of peace and eradication of poverty and sustainable development and intercultural dialogue through education, the sciences, culture, and communication and information. So this is the organizations that entrusted by global community to support realization of sustainable development goals, still SDG 4 on education, and to lead coordination of the education 2030 agenda. So UNESCO targets all types of countries from so-called the least developed countries to OECD DAC countries with tailored approaches. So what did they do during the post-war Korea? Actually, during the Korean War, from 1950 to 1953, everything was demolished. So the education sector was the same. So UNESCO selected and dispatched 6 experts to South Korea in 1952, and they conducted field investigations across the all 9 provinces and including the special city of Seoul. And they observed all existing types of education work. And this mission submits their reports on the survey of existing educational conditions in on 1st of December 1952. And then after 2 years, 1954, United Nations Korean Reconstruction Agency allocated 8,500 USD to rebuild South Korea's educational system. The Korean government and UNESCO collaborated UNKRA to establish a textbook printing plant near Seoul. So you can see there is photos, and you can also Google it in order to just type UNKRA, and you can see some photos that UNESCO built buildings and produced textbook at that point of time. But not only external help, but also, yeah, this is also kind of external help, but there is a huge successful cases, so-called Minnesota project at SNU, Seoul National University. It was not enough, only UNESCO's funds and law. So during the Korean War, Seoul National University also heavily demolished. So at that point of time, the chancellor of SNU constantly requests to the Minister of Korean Education, we need more funds from the externals in order to reconstruct SNU. So U.S. Foreign Operation Administration, FOA, decided to fund certain amount of money through University of Minnesota. So we called Minnesota project. So that project was decided and operated from 1954 to 1962. So in that project, there are two main missions. One is technical assistance, basically, one is technical assistance and another is equipment assistance. So when it comes to the technical assistance, basically, which is exchange programs. So for Korean SNU faculty members to have a more advanced, have experience at the University of Minnesota. So over the last 10 years, more than 200 SNU faculty members visit Minnesota University, and about 20 faculty members obtain a PhD from the University of Minnesota. So basically, that technical assistance enhance quality of research and quality of teaching skills for SNU faculty members at that point of time. And also, they also provide equipment assistance as well. Basically, provide some equipment for the science, agricultural sciences, engineering, and medical sciences. But I also want to highlight that there was counterpart funds from the Korean government. It was not only funded by Minnesota or US government, but also the South Korean government also matched the fund in order to improve their ownership too. And at that point of time, this project mainly invested on agricultural sciences and engineering and medical sciences. So lots of SNU faculty members agreed on, due to this project, now SNU is able to be one of the top university in Korea, but also in the world now. So this project became a backbone for SNU to become one of the prestigious university, in globally. So based on this kind of experience, not only through the academic research paper, but also their own experience while they were just literally living in South Korea. So the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also always keeps saying that education is very important for the development. So as you can see, direct quote here, when I'm asked as a Secretary General, the secret of my country's economic development and political maturity in a short period, my answer is simple: it is education. So lots of Korean policy decision makers also think education is not only important itself, but also it is important for economic development and political development as well. So based on this consensus and perceptions in Korean society. Last year, there was 2024 Korean and Africa Summit. And in the summit, education as a driver of sustainable development and mutual prosperity agenda between the Africa delegations and Korea. So first Korean and Africa Summit was held last year in June, and head of state and government acknowledged that education and human resource development has been central to Korea's rapid economic and social progress. So as I mentioned before, post-war Korea lacked natural resources, but invested heavily in its human resources to drive development. So education is now a key focus for strengthening cooperation between Korea too. So Korea is quite enthusiasm to help and to assist education sectors in developing countries. So as a result of joint commitment from the Korean and Africa Summit, they decided to cultivate talented human resources through education and training, particularly in the field of science and technology that most African leaders request to. And also they initiate the Tech for Africa initiative to enhance digital capabilities of the youth. And they also decided to expand the infrastructure for education and research. And they also acknowledge that established technical and vocational education and training schools in order to reduce unemployment rate, especially for the youth. And they also promised to expand scholarship programs such as Global Korea scholarships. So now I think the South Korea government eager to invite more students from the developing countries, by and large, Global South. So in order to that, from the South Korea, try to strengthen education system and institutions in Africa. So basically, they increase more ODA for African countries to enhance educational infrastructure such as schools. So, and also higher education system in Africa continues to face significant challenges, as we all may know. While Africa's scientific output is growing faster than anywhere else in the world, it is still accounts for less than 1% of the global research. So it is kind of important issues that all the donors are saying that aware of that the Africa's education system is important, but somehow they don't transfer knowledges, or they don't enhance knowledges for African agencies to improve their research itself. And in realistic terms, Africa invested just less than 0.59% of their GDP in R&D, compared to the 1.79% worldwide. For instance, Korea is ranked as a top 2 for the R&D sector compared to the Korea's GDP now. In 2017, nearly 15 million students were enrolled in African universities, representing less than 10% of global total of 220 million. So this is the African governments are facing for their education systems as well. And lots of outsiders need to focus on to help them. So what Africa education needs, especially for the higher education and R&D? Oh, here. So in order to advancing AI education, this is what South Korea government tried to enhancing Africa education these days. So artificial intelligence, AI, is transforming all areas of human life, and it is essential that Africa keeps pace with this global shift. To enhance the capacity of African countries to adopt and implement AI technologies effectively. In order to that, they empower individuals in Africa to manage their personal data to improve data governance across the continent. So foster digital skills and competency to bridge both cognitive and digital divide. So in order to overcome these challenges, South Korea is comparative advantages in order to help this sector. So integration of education with national development goals and global perspectives and local adoptions and experience in bridging education gaps and focus on R&D and technological advancement and advanced AI technology experts and digital infrastructure and national AI strategy. So now the South Korea having good reputation of technology, ICT. So now South Korea is try to help AI strategy for certain top universities of Africa. So what they could learn from Korean case, which is transformative power of education. So education policy focused on human resource development. So a driving force behind Korean rapid national development, there was human resource played a big role for the economic development, but also other sectors of development too. So Korea was one of the poorest country in Asia with a per capita income lower than Ethiopia and Ghana in 2061. And 1990s, Korea's per capita income was more than 10,000 USD, making its Asia's second members of the OECD. So education was vital in fostering economic growth and creating skilled workforce and positioning Korea as a global leader in innovation and technology, especially. So while South Korea's rapid educational and economic development has brought tremendous success, it has also revealed certain limitations. The emphasis on competition in education has created significant societal challenges, as you may know. Simply, it is so competitive that so many young students and so many young people are grilled and suffered from pressure that they have to get into the good universities and good scores. And as I mentioned, many students face immense pressure and stress due to highly competitive culture. And public education has lost ground to private institutions, which often focus narrowly on university entrance exams, sometimes at expenses of holistic learning. So in order to get into the good university, many Korean students and Korean families are suffered, and they send their students to private universities in order to get external studies. So this is what I wrote here. So in order to policy suggestions, somehow a factor of success and failure from the Korean cases. The first one is accurate needs assessment, a key to mutual benefits. So align African needs with a Korean comparative advantage, but they should recognize that development experience not the universal and not the transferable 100%. So they have to tailor with their own context. So which means I think it is also important that all the donors beware that to enhance African agencies or recipient agencies to help them how they allocate or how they select and choose from the donor success policies. And also regional and contextual differences require tailored approaches and strengthening mutual understanding through collaboration between governments and academia. And second suggestions is education. Education is not a silo, but a comprehensive approach. Align African needs with the Korean comparative advantages, but but this is not a development experience universally transferred, as I mentioned before. So education is not a single approach to make a successful the development, but it is a holistic approach. So they need to tailor those kind of approach within their context. In order to that, the outsiders, donors to be aware to enhance recipient agencies to build such a capacities too. So I hope I didn't pass so I'm gonna finish here. I hope that I spent more time than you allowed me. Thank you for listening.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Dr. Cho, for such a wonderful and enlightening presentation on importance of human resource development and education, taking Africa as a case. Particularly the transformation of Korean education system, as you have shown here in such a short time, has been phenomenal. And another important note that I've identified was that the public institutions are losing ground to private institutions in Korea. So we'll give the floor for question answer in a later part of this session. Right now, I would like to take the honor to introducing the next speaker for today's webinar, Professor Dr. Sang Yong Kang. He is the Director of Center for South Asian Studies under SNUAC. Professor Kang, I now invite you, sir, to please share your thoughts on Korea's experience with vocational education system, its implication for Bangladesh. It's over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction and kind invitation to this event. I will go through my manuscript. I hope you see the manuscript shared. I will read through my manuscript with skipping some parts. Reviewing the 5 decades from 1950 to 2000, it's evident that vocational education in South Korea played a pivotal role in workforce formation, industrial upgrading, and export-led growth. A few key themes emerge. First, mass supply of skilled and semi-skilled labor. Vocational high schools and junior colleges were instrumental in turning a large agrarian populace into an industrial workforce within a generation. Especially in the 1960s and 70s, these institutions supplied the sheer volume of skilled workers needed for labor-intensive manufacturing and later for heavy industries. By tailoring enrollment and specialties to 5-year economic plans, the government ensured that sectors like textiles, electronics assembly, shipbuilding, and automotive had a steady pipeline of trained workers. For example, during the first export boom in the 60s, unskilled youth were rapidly trained and funneled into factories, and as the economy moved up the value chain, vocational schools churned out technicians for more complex tasks. This manpower planning through education was a cornerstone of what scholars called developmental state approach. The state actively matched education outputs to economic strategies. The result was near full employment in manufacturing by the 1970s and 1980s, with relatively low levels of the skill mismatch that many other developing countries experienced. Second, industrial upgrading and technological adaptation. Vocational and technical education facilitated South Korea's ability to absorb, imitate, and innovate technologies from abroad, a key to its industrial upgrading. Many historians of Korea's development note that access to modern technology alone would not have yielded growth without an educated workforce to implement it. During the heavy industrialization of the 1970s, the expanding cadre of technicians from junior colleges and vocational schools enabled the Korean firms to operate steel mills, shipyards, and chemical plants at globally competitive levels within a short time. In the 80s and 90s, as Korea ventured into semiconductors, consumer electronics, and automotive design, vocational institutes added programs in precision electronics, computer-aided design, and machine programming, producing technicians who could handle sophisticated production processes. This continuous upskilling supported local firms in climbing the technological ladder from simple assembly to high value added manufacturing. Moreover, the presence of a technically skilled workforce encouraged foreign companies to invest in Korea or engage in technology transfer partnerships, knowing that Koreans could learn and implement new process quickly. Thus, vocational education was a critical ingredient in the industrial upgrading that characterized each stage of Korea's development, from light industry to heavy industry to knowledge-intensive industry. Third, export competitiveness. Perhaps most tangibly, vocational education contributed to the quality and productivity that underpinned South Korea's export success. In the 1960s, Korea's labor cost advantage in goods like apparel and footwear was amplified by the fact that workers had basic education and training, allowing them to achieve higher productivity than typical low-wage countries. In the 70s, 80s, as Korea began exporting cars, ships, and electronics, having a disciplined, skilled labor force became a comparative advantage. Korean companies gained a reputation for reliable manufacturing capability, delivering products that met international standards, thanks in large part to technicians on the factory floor. The government's effort to boost the image and morale of skilled workers, for example, publicizing victories in international skills Olympics and award model workers, also fed into a cultural craftsmanship that benefited export quality. By the 90s, Korea was exporting high technology products, and again, the investment in human capital paid off. Engineers and technicians trained in Korean institutions drove innovations in process efficiency and product design, helping Korean brands become globally competitive. For example, Samsung's rise in electronics was facilitated by local technical talent. In summary, vocational education and training provided the human skills infrastructure without which South Korea's export-led development would not have been as successful or as rapid. Fourth, institutional flexibility and public-private partnership. A recurring factor in all decades was the flexibility with which vocational education was managed to meet challenging needs. The government dynamically adjusted policies, expanding capacity when shortages loomed, shifting focus from secondary to post-secondary when higher skills were needed, and involving industry through mandates or collaboration with when appropriate. This flexibility was possible due to strong central coordination. The EPB, the Economic Planning Board, and later various interministerial bodies ensured education plans dovetailed with economic plans and a willingness to innovate. For example, the 5-year integrated schools of the 1960s, the levy system of the 1960s, the cluster collaboration of the 1990s. Moreover, partnership with non-state actors were vital. The private sector relieved the state's financial burden by establishing schools. By 1980, the majority of vocational institutions were private. Large firms trained workers beyond their own needs in the 70s, and foreign donors aided in jump-starting training centers. These partnerships amplified the impact of government initiatives and embedded vocational training in the broader society and economy. Fifth, workforce development and social mobility. Finally, it's important to note the social impact of vocational education in workforce development. It provided a path for many individuals from modest backgrounds to acquire marketable skills and secure better livelihoods. Especially in earlier decades, a rural or working class youth who attended a technical high school could quickly find a stable job and become part of emerging middle class, thereby fueling social development alongside economic growth. Over time, however, a challenge emerged as vocational paths became stigmatized relative to university paths, potentially limiting their attractiveness. This was something the government continually tried to manage through image campaign, improved links to higher education, etc. Nonetheless, the contribution of vocational education to creating a broad-based skilled workforce in Korea, one of the most literate and technically trained among developing countries by the 80s, cannot be overstated. It undergirded both strong economic performance and relatively equitable growth, as vocational graduates shared in the benefits of industrialization. I will skip. I believe you are much more informed on the situation in Bangladesh. Therefore, I will skip over. To last chapter, lessons from Korea's experience for Bangladesh. First, national manpower planning integrated with education policy. A core success of South Korea was the integration of economic development plans with education and manpower policy through the Economic Planning Board. Bangladesh could adopt a similar mechanism to project workforce needs sector-wise and guide VET institution outputs accordingly. This requires coordination between Planning Commission, Ministry of Education, and key industry sectors, for example, RMG, light engineering, agro-processing. Second, expanding and upgrading technical colleges. Korea's experience highlights the importance of post-secondary technical education, especially junior colleges producing middle-tier technicians. Bangladesh should invest in diploma-level technical institutions, ensure strong quality assurance, and link them to industrial zones via public-private partnership. For instance, technical college near economic zones like Savar, Narayanganj, and Chittagong could specialize in skills for nearby manufacturing firms. Third, employer involvement in training, provision, and design. The levy grant system used in Korea incentivized employers to train workers and share responsibility for skills development. Bangladesh could pilot similar schemes, starting in export-heavy sector such as RMG, leather, or shipbuilding. mandatory industry internship, co-designed curricula, and employer-led certification boards, as in Korea's Meister schools, can ensure market relevance. Fourth, elevating the social prestige and upward mobility of vocational paths. South Korea tackled the social stigma by public campaigns, job guarantee programs, and clear articulation routes. For example, from vocational high school to junior college to university. Bangladesh should adopt such vertical mobility system, allowing VET graduates to pursue further study through technical universities or professional certifications, thereby legitimize the vocational track as a viable career path. Lastly, fifth, decentralized and private sector friendly expansion. Korea's success in rapid scaling VET institutions was due to, in part, to allowing private foundations to establish schools under public guidelines. Bangladesh could expand accreditation and funding schemes for high-performing private vocational institutes, particularly in underserved rural areas, while maintaining regulatory oversight via BTEB, Bangladesh Technical Education Board. So I have presented you the gist of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Prof. Kang, for your engaging and impactful presentation, particularly sharing with us your thoughts and recommendation on the vocational education and training system of Bangladesh. We can see from your presentation that with right mindset and goal, how a 50-year long educational journey can develop a pool of skilled human resources seeked by the global economy. And we can now work on how Bangladesh can adopt this model right from the policy making to the root level execution for an impactful educational system at our country. Rest assured that we do not lack neither in talent nor in abilities. We just need being guided to the right direction. So I'm sure some of our esteemed attendees must have some questions to ask, but we will now move on to the panel discussion. And Professor Dr. Manzoor Kader, I now invite you to please share with us your thoughts on the two highly informative presentations we have just experienced. On to you, Professor Kader.
Thank you very much, Professor Asif. So first of all, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, and he's also the Director of Institute of Governance Development International Studies now. So for organizing such a wonderful webinar. So we have a lot to learn from our two learned speakers, our dear Professor Kang and Professor Cho. So they presented their findings so nicely, and I'm sure there are a lot of things that we can take for us to move forward. So it's a very right time to organize this kind of seminar because Bangladesh is at the moment is kind of a crossroad in terms of their economic, social, and human development. Particularly in human development, we are facing a lot of the challenges. So economic and human development wise, maybe we are doing better than Africa, but some of the challenges that we are facing will be very close to post-war Africa or post-war Korea and African examples. So I would like to explain the four major issues that we feel as an educational institutions. First of all is youth unemployment. So youth unemployment has been one of the major concerns of Bangladesh. So even though our unemployment rate is around 4.53%, but if we consider the students completing tertiary education, so unemployment rate is much higher. It's like 13.11% among the tertiary education completed students. So that's compared to that's really high compared to our total percentage, 4.53. And also, if we consider only the youth, that is 15 to 29 years, so around 22% of them are not in any kind of education, unemployment, and training. So that's again a very big number. And even though the people who are working in the informal sector, so out of those, 38.2% of them are youths too. So these joblessness among the youth created a massive dissatisfaction. So which was one of the reason behind the student protest during July 2024 and caused the regime change. And the second one related to this youth unemployment, that may be one of the reasons that we couldn't create enough job for them actually. So like Professor Cho said, there is a huge gap between policy and outcomes. So our policies are there. Our national employment policy, which says we should create 3.5 million jobs annually from 2010 to 2011 to 2023. But at the aggregate level, total employment increased at only 1.23 million per year. So even though our target is 3.5, but we could actually create only 1.23. So that's just less than half. And also there is a skill gap, so that we often hear from our employers that whatever we are teaching at the tertiary or at the TVET, the Technological and Vocational Educational Institute, so they could not meet the demand of their employers. So which is why they're actually hiring a lot of people, a lot of expatriate people from India, Sri Lanka, UAE, like that. So, and we are paying a huge amount of foreign remittance to them. So the some of the reason that has been mentioned in different research papers, that our curriculum does not updated enough. Our instructor development programs are not quite massive. Then the industry, academia, networking opportunities are not too much there. Then inadequate research grants and facilities, which is hampering the practical learning skills. And one of the another reason that they mentioned that is lower participation in STEM education. So these are one of the reasons the employer always say you cannot provide us, you cannot meet our demand. So we have to hire people from abroad. And the last one again, there is a huge policy gap, because all the policies regarding our education system, our National Education Policy 2010, our Strategic Plan for Higher Education 2018 to 2030, our National Skill Development Program, the first one was at 2010 and the second one is 2021. And all our 5-year plans, the recent one was the 8th 5-year plan. So all these policies actually suggested that we should increase our education budget, but Bangladesh could not do so historically. So the most recent budget that was actually passed yesterday. So the allocation for education is only 1.53%, only 1.53% of GDP, whereas the benchmark is 4 to 6% set by SDG and UNESCO Education Framework for Action. So if we consider the implementation, so it's 1.53%, that's the prescribed budget, that's a proposed budget. But when we see the actual budget, it's actually even 10 to 15% underutilized. So we cannot actually implement the least budget that we allocate for our education. So all these four are actually hampering our education, employment, then all these things. So we can definitely take some of the examples that Korea has done for Africa, but the situation may not be same for all of us. The one thing that I would suggest for that can be implemented for Africa and for any developing countries as well. That's the industry should create a mandatory sandwich program for the tertiary education institute students or the TVET students. So if there is a sandwich program in between their studies, so that will help them to make up for their lack of skills and prepare for their job sectors. So at the moment, at the curriculum development phase, we have ensured industry participation, because it's mandatory that any curriculum development of the tertiary education institutes should have industry participation, so that we can know what they actually need. But it may be now it's time, I think it's time to make it mandatory for the industry to have these mandatory internship programs, like Professor Khan said. And if even if needed, the government can provide some incentive to the employers that we are giving you incentive, but you have to hire some, or you have to have some mandatory internship program, so that the skill gap can be minimized. And also the entrepreneurial system. So that's also same for Africa and Bangladesh. The entrepreneurship must be developed, and the entrepreneurial ecosystem must be developed. At the moment, I think both the economy will face the same kind of situation. It's like funding problem, and that's one of the major issues, and then regulatory bottlenecks, and then for entrepreneurial activities, and then also the university, the tertiary institutions that should create incubation hubs. So incubation hubs in Bangladesh, we have seen a few universities, few tertiary universities, they have already developed the incubation hubs, but we can make it mandatory for all the education institutes, even if the government has to provide some funding for those. And then if I come back to Tibet, I think at the moment the enrollment rate is around 13 to 14%. But again, our policy says it should be made 30% by 2030, so that unemployment rate can be reduced by 2041, when we are expecting to becoming developed countries. So 13.84%, that's severely less compared to our number of youths and number of students who are completing their high secondary education. And most of the Tibet institutions, they are giving training on agriculture and ICT. So, but these needs to be developed. Professor Kang mentioned some of the experience that we can take from Korea, but it's good news that 5-year national action plan from 2022 to 2027 has recently been developed under the National Skill Development Policy, which actually aimed at developing a demand-driven skills ecosystem, then outline a flexible and responsive training facilities, then enhancing industry engagements. So most of the things that Professor Kang mentioned are actually in that action plan, but we have to wait and see how that action plan can actually be implemented and how far we can achieve. So like Professor Cho and Professor Kang both said, how Korea helped developing the African countries. The similar thing, South Korea can help the Bangladeshi tertiary institutions to make ourselves a skilled nations. So it's like our Dr. Nahid, our Vice Chancellor, he actually mentioned that we already signed an MOU with Youngwon Corporation, and under that MOU, one of the avenue was we will be connected at Chittagong Independent University. Our faculty members will be connected with leading South Korean universities, and we are expecting to have some help in terms of our curriculum development, faculty development, student exchange. So already one of our student completed his master's from South Korea with South Korean scholarship. So such kind of collaboration, it started with Chittagong Independent University, but it can go to other technical universities, our TVET systems, and all these things. So this is how we can develop our tertiary education system even more. And also the TVET, like as South Korea is doing wonderful in terms of technology and ICT. So the TVET institutions, we can modernize them even further with South Korean help as well. The TVET institution mostly, I think the rate of enrollment is such low because, like Professor Khan says, it's a social stigma, and also there is a gender gap. I think the parents or the students think it's the TVET education is for male mainly, so it's not female friendly. So if we can ensure gender gap, and if we can ensure the proper education and proper training facilities are available in TVET, so this is where we should focus. But having said that, our budget allocation for TVET it's not again up to the mark or up to the international standard. So it's growing maybe. So the TVET, so we started that in, there is a different wing. We started in 2016. So the education budget is increasing, but I mean, we should give more focus on that. So I think that's all I had to say. So if with proper plan and proper implementation, we can reduce the gap between policy and where we actually want to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kader, for your summing up today's takeaways, highlighting the ground truths of Bangladesh. Fortunately, at CIU, I can see some of these issues that you raised are already being addressed, and we are open for further improvements, and hence this webinar. So we are running a bit short in time. So now I'm opening the session for question answer from the attendees, holding my queries back. So the floor is now open. If any of those in the attendance would like to ask any question, please raise your hand, and our speakers will respond to your queries. Any question from the floor? Okay. Meanwhile, once it's from the, I cannot see anything from the floor. Anybody is asking. So let me give you. I have a few questions from Dr. Cho and few from Prof. Kang. First, I would like to ask Prof. Kang. Now that you have identified some of the issues that we have in Bangladesh about our TVET education, the VET educational system, what elements of Korean system that you think are transferable to Bangladesh as is, just to expedite the process?
Yes, maybe we can, go on further with endless discussions, but I will say the main point and main thing, what we could learn from our experience. Koreans can learn from our experience itself, of course. The point is flexibility. Every plan for future is only plan. It's not reality. Nobody knows what comes. And even in 60s and 50s, when Koreans prepared the future educational plan, they did not know what comes. Semiconductor industry at that time was not have begun or bloomed. And anytime what we need was flexibility. And the point is flexibility, and the question would be the point, how we could open the possibility of flexibility in the future in our society. In this respect, the Korean experience is revealing that the cooperation between private and public sector, it enables the required flexibility. If the public sector is too strong and dominant in educational decision, they will not be flexible enough. But private sector, they will not ready to invest much more than required in a specific period. And therefore, there would be not possible to establish a long-term plan. Therefore, any time, what I think most important is the flexibility and keep the attitude to enable the social flexibility in this respect. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Prof. Kang. One for Dr. Cho. Dr. Cho, you've discussed a lot about, you have your specific expertise in African area, African region about their education system. Now, I have a question. How do you think that the cultural mindset of African, what you have experienced in Africa, and the difference in the cultural mindset in the Bangladesh scenario is going to shape up the student and teachers' performance in our education system?
Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, when it comes to the comparison between Korea and African context, of course, Africa is continent, it's not a country, but let me try to generalize. Somehow South Korean education system was not globalized at that point of time in the past, whereas African universities are somehow already globalized during the 60s and 70s because of the Western masters colonized them, and their universities are somehow structurally, systemically closer to the Western universities. So for instance, University of London already had a kind of same curriculums or long distance curriculums open to the Makerere University, Nairobi universities, and even Harare universities, for instance. So, which means probably during the 70s and 80s, Africa universities got a better global reputation compared to the Korea somehow. But now during the 80s, SAP, the structure adjustment program involved in invention into the most of African countries, and public fund cuts, and the current African universities are facing under the lack of the budget. So that is the kind of Korean, the African universities trajectories. So what this means is that African cultural mindset is not the quite big gap already within the African universities context. So some elites or some students are already very global mindset, global perspectives, and even they got a lot of exchange experience with the Western countries, whereas on average, or the rest of African students are not having such a prestigious experience. So within that context, I think we need to be aware that try to focus on, try to specifically categorize and targeted groups in order to enhance their education. I think that is what, as a donor or as external players, need to think of diversity or big gap of students' background, students' capabilities when we need to help. But in realities, as a donor, as external players, they prefer to work or collaborate with so-called good reputation of universities, which means they also can help. They probably, for those who are already prestigious somehow,
Right.
experienced students. So I think that is what I want to highlight as for your answer.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. We have a question from the audience. Sorry, we have a question from the audience, and that the question is directed to Professor Kang. The question is from Mr. Calvin, and his question is: most of the Korea's factory workers come from developing countries like Bangladesh and Philippines. Most of these workers are also vocationally trained in these countries before moving to Korea. For many reasons, the workers do not stay in these countries for lack of work or maybe the monetary benefit of work. So what should Bangladesh do in this case to involve them more within the country, or keep them more in the country after they are trained?
Sure. Thank you for really significant question. Nowadays, there are numerous foreign labor force in Korea, in industrial sites from developing countries, Bangladesh and Philippines and also Mongolia, such countries. What is needed is a long-term plan for really mutually beneficial plan to establish a cooperative relationship between Korea and other countries. And my idea and my suggestion was anytime to establish a proper industrial institutions in locations, just in Bangladesh or Mongolia, in Philippines, state or private, ever. Anyway, the point is that locally educated people are immigrating to Korea, but normally they have only limited permission for 5 years and further 5 years, no more. And they are educated in Korea further to enable much complicated works required in Korea. But if they go back to home country, such a skill is lost actually for both countries, for developing country and for Korea. For both sides, it's a huge loss. And nowadays, we should shift our idea. Labor force migration should not be a physical and biological migration. I mean, we could cooperate to establish a advanced industrial site in locations there, and they could do their jobs further. For example, in shipbuilding, Korea is technically, of course, in quantity, China is nowadays #1, but technically, Korea is the #1 country in shipbuilding. And Bangladesh is, of course, the leading country in shipbreaking field. And Bangladesh needs to shift from shipbreaking to shipbuilding country. And then Korea could help Bangladesh people to establish small shipbuilding yards, and they could supply the parts for Korean shipbuilding companies. Anyway, Korean shipbuilding companies, they are importing parts. But if Bangladeshi people are educated in Korean shipbuilding companies, they are acquainted with the way of working in Korean shipbuilding company. Therefore, they are ready to work with Korean company, and even they can stay in Bangladesh and they work for Korean company further. It will be mutually beneficial, and such, how can I say, industrial policy in cooperation with both countries should be thought out. And I suggest we should find a way to realize such an idea in future.
Thank you. Thank you for wrapping up in a very nice way. I believe, Mr. Kelvin, have your answer. We are now running short of time actually, and I believe I shouldn't be allowing any more question any further, and we call it a day. So on the closing remark, as we come to the close of today's thought-provoking session, I would like to sincerely thank to our distinguished speakers from SNUAC, and also the Vice Chancellor of CIU and the Professor Manzoor Kader for their deep, insightful deliveries and generous sharing of experience. This webinar has opened up meaningful reflections of how Bangladesh can enhance the quality or equity and effectiveness to our educational system. As we have experienced, as we have came to know right now from South Korean example, we learned that the transformation is possible. And right now, Dr. Cho was mentioning the case of Africa, whose tertiary level education system was ahead in terms of during the period of 60s and 70s. And then South Korea, just because of their goal and maybe the culture or their motivation, they just took over. And so it's possible with clear vision, consistent investment, and a culture that values learning. It's possible. So let this be more than a discussion today. Let it be a starting point for collaboration, reform, and innovation in our own context. On behalf of IGDIS and CIU at large, I thank all participants for your engagement, and I hope we'll all continue this dialogue in days ahead. Stay inspired, stay committed, and together, let's build a better future through education. Thank you very much for your time and for your sharing your deliveries. Dr. Cho, Prof. Kang, Professor Nurul Absar, and Professor Manzoor Kader, thank you for your time and insight, and let's call it a day for today. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you. Take care.
See you. See you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.